supposed to call you guys.
This is who, sir?
David Koresh. Mount Carmel Center, we're being shot all up out here.
Okay, where are you?
Oh, where am I? I'm at Mount Carmel Center.
Okay, hang on just a second.
All right.
Go ahead, I can't barely hear you. What?
Okay, don't hang up, David, okay? I'm going to get somebody to talk to you.
74427.
Are you in the complex?
70. Hold on, I've got another man.
Are you in the complex?
Yeah. Yeah. We're here.
Okay.
I've got you on the other side of your phone, so I'm going to pass you. So hold on just a minute. Okay, hold on.
Like a voice coming.
Yeah, this Lynch.
Hey, Lynch?
Yeah.
That's kind of a funny name there. Oh, listen, no, look.
Now, who am I speaking with?
This is David Koresh.
As much as I really dislike talking politics, I equally dislike discussing religion. Religion is convoluted and at times nonsensical. Take, for instance, the Branch Davidians, which is an offshoot of the Davidian Seventh-day Adventists, which itself is an offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventists, because religious people cannot agree the meaning of the words in a book. The Branch Davidians didn't start out as a Waco doomsday cult, though. Well, they did start preaching doomsday, but the Waco part came later. Well, actually, preaching doomsday is pretty wacko. Okay, so it's always been a Waco doomsday cult. But more importantly, it wasn't founded by David Koresh, which wasn't even Koresh's real name. Yep, Koresh was born Vernon Howell, but we'll get to him later. In this video, we are going to go into how the Branch Davidians were founded, the rise of David Koresh, the lead up to the standoff, and then the aftermath. So we cannot talk about the Branch Davidians without talking about the Shepherd's Rod, also known as the Davidians. Victor Hotef was a Seventh-day Adventist who decided that the church needed a bit of reforming. Well, he tried, with the book he wrote called The Shepherd's Rod. He felt that the church was being too lax in their teachings. The same church that practices the following: that Jesus is going to return any day now, a strict kosher diet with emphasis on vegetarianism, that the wicked are not sent to hell for all eternity in punishment but are destroyed there, and a myriad of other things. To be completely honest, doctrines are not my strong suit. I just wanted to go over some of the ideas of the Adventists. What I'm trying to get at is that Hotef felt that the church needed to be stricter. The reason why Hotef believed this was because he believed the second coming of Jesus was imminent and the day of judgment was coming. But for the sake of this video, I'm really glad this isn't about religion, just the evolution of thought in the religion. Anyways, Hotef ended up splitting from the church and ended up creating the Davidians, which held similar ideals and practices of the Adventists, except with Hotef's The Shepherd's Rod as a way to interpret the Bible. He is actually the one who built the Mount Carmel Center in Waco in 1935, which was a commune that the followers of the Shepherd's Rod lived in. And he died in 1955 and his wife took over. And she considered herself a prophet and thought the world was going to end in 1959. When that didn't happen, the Davidians fractured. Benjamin Rodin created the Branch Davidians and took over the Mount Carmel Center. So the Mount Carmel Center became the commune for the Branch Davidians. And like all good cults, one of the doctrines of the Branch Davidians was to separate yourself from the world, which means no talking to anyone outside the compound. In 1978, Rodin died. His wife took over, then his son George took over. For reference, they were still all about doomsday at this point in the second coming of Jesus. George didn't last long though, because Vernon Howell showed up. Old Vernon Howell would take over the group and rename himself David Koresh. Vernon Howell was born August 17, 1959 in Houston, Texas. His mother was a 14-year-old girl. His father didn't stick around, going off to impregnate another teenage girl. Then his mother abandoned him to his grandmother when he was 4 and then returned to him when he was 7. He grew up lonely and picked on. At 19, he ended up getting a 15-year-old pregnant, which is going to be a theme because Vernie, as the kids called him, had a bit of a habit for liking younger girls. And older girls. We'll get there in a minute. He became an Adventist, but was kicked out for wanting to marry the pastor's daughter. He was kind of obsessed with her and, according to him, prayed to God for answers. And when he was done praying, he found an open Bible open to Isaiah 34:16, which reads, "Seek ye out the book of the Lord, and read, no one of these shall fail, none shall want her mate, for thy mouth hath commanded, and hath spirit it hath gathered them." And I know I probably butchered that, but that's what it says. And he took this as a sign from God, but the pastor saw it as mental illness and stalking, so he was kicked out of the church. In 1981, he made his way to Mount Carmel, where he began to claim to have the gift of prophecy. He ended up having a secret affair with Benjamin Rodin's widow. Like I said, he seemed to like girls of all ages. And he pissed off George Rodin enough that George and his followers kicked him out, along with 25 others who decided Vernon was a great dude. Howell and followers ended up in Palestine, Texas. There they stayed, continuing the feud with George Rodin. That was until 1990. That is when they decided that they waited long enough and entered the Mount Carmel compound by force, carrying firearms. And a gunfight ensued where George was shot in the hand and chest. Howell was arrested along with his followers, but he was acquitted. You see, a couple years prior, according to Howell, Rodin challenged Howell to rise a long-deceased member of the cult from the dead, and Rodin even exhumed the dead body for Howell to do. But Rodin claimed that he was only moving the body to a different grave. Instead of taking this supposed challenge, Howell went to the police stating Rodin was illegally moving a body, which the cops claimed he needed evidence before they were able to do anything. So according to Howell, the reason for the firefight had nothing to do with taking over the obvious cult, but to get evidence. They claimed that all the shots from Howell and his group were actually aimed at a tree. Yeah, he was acquitted, and some of the jury even offered to hug him. Rodin would later go into a mental institution for killing a man he thought was sent by Howell. Also in 1990, Howell changed his name to David Koresh. So from here on out, we will refer to him as David Koresh. Koresh thought at first that he was a prophet. Then he grew a God complex, calling himself the Son of God, and claimed when he was a child that he had a vision of God that told him that he was the Messiah. And well, his followers grew, as well as his abuse of power. For one, he encouraged members who were married to be celibate with one another, and would even have sexual relationships with married women. In fact, he pretty much felt that all the women in the cult were married to him by default, and thus only he could have sexual relations with them, which included children as young as 10. And he fathered many children with these women. 24 children were born to him. This is part of his doctrine called the House of David. And Koresh wasn't a good father either. He would beat his children as young as just months old for just crying. In fact, he persuaded other followers with children to do the same, to beat the children as much as they could. Also, he would separate families if he felt that they had a tighter bond to each other than him. Also, women were told to not wear jewelry, only long blouses, no makeup, nothing but long blouses. Followers were told when and where to sleep, what to eat, and when to eat, which included banning sugars, flour, and dairy. Everyone in the cult had to follow everything Koresh said to a T. Anyone who questioned was punished. Anyone who made mistakes were publicly embarrassed. And kids who acted up tended to get beaten with sticks. I imagine living in this group was a living hell, which is ironic because it was a group that believed that they were chosen to survive doomsday and live in paradise. When Koresh was just a member, he led Bible study, as well as play music for the cult. Apparently, he was a good guitar player. Well, once he took over, things got darker. He would lead sermons that would last an entire day, and if you nodded off or weren't paying attention, you would get punished. Koresh was prepping for doomsday. He believed the outside world was going to destroy itself, and he needed to prepare his followers for that, which A part of that was stockpiling illegal weapons, which he had an arsenal. Over 160 guns, grenades, grenade launchers, stuff to make more explosives, and illegal modifications to firearms. And by the way, this was all in Texas. But the outside world began to get wind of what was going on at the compound. In late 1992, rumors began to circulate about the child bride situation. Then in 1993, just before the standoff, the Waco Tribune-Herald began publishing a series of articles called The Sinful Messiah. Add on to this, the police in the area called the ATF about the illegal goings-on at Mount Carmel. Everything fell into place for an intense standoff. A standoff that would feel like Koresh was right and the world was imploding.
Hello?
Yes.
This is Dave Koresh. I'm supposed to call you guys.
This is who, sir?
David Koresh. Mount Carmel Center, we're being shot all up out here.
Okay, where are you?
Oh, where am I? I'm at Mount Carmel Center.
Okay, hang on just a second.
All right.
According to the ATF, they had been investigating Koresh and the Branch Davidians since at least May of 1992. But it was a really poorly drawn up affidavit that procured the search warrant that led to the events to come. The Aguilera Affidavit was written up by David Aguilera. It pretty much was written off rumors without probable cause to get a warrant. On February 28, 1993 at 9:30 a.m., the ATF attempted to enact the warrant, which was for the search of the premises and to arrest Koresh. That went over pretty badly. No one really knows who shot first, the ATF or the Branch Davidians, but when the ATF agents attempted to enact the warrants, a firefight ensued. 4 agents were killed on the first day while 16 ended up wounded. The standoff truly began and the FBI was called in. The FBI descended on the property within hours of the firefight with Agent Jeff Jamar taking command. And when I say he took command, what I really mean is he took command of the negotiations. The ATF, on the other hand, had a hard time communicating with the FBI. While the FBI was attempting to at least communicate and negotiate, the ATF were more interested in breaking the compound open and taking it by force. But President Clinton ordered the FBI to negotiate with Koresh and his followers. 10 children were released on the same day it started. Seemed like a promising start, but this was going to be a long standoff. For one, this was not going to be a simple negotiation. Koresh proved to be difficult to deal with, which I will get into later. But in good faith, on March 3rd, 2 elderly female members were allowed to leave the compound. And in good faith by the FBI, they were not charged with murder. On March 5th, a young girl walked out of the compound with a note attached to her. The note let those outside know that once all the children were released, the adults were going to kill themselves, which was contradictory to what Koresh was telling negotiators. He was telling them that there was no plans on suicide. On March 9th, the ATF and the FBI cut the electricity to the compound. This was done in hopes that they would all just come out and surrender, but that did not happen.
There was a news crew from a local television station that had learned of the impending search warrant. In their quest to get a breaking story, they got lost.
There was a mailman who saw members of the media and asked what was going on.
The postman turned out to be a Davidian.
He immediately went back and advised David Koresh that the ATF was on their way.
What probably hindered everything as well was the news coverage of the standoff as it was happening. Much like today, when something huge is going on, the major mainstream news companies also descended on the compound. And much like today, if you're flipping between Fox News, CNN, or ABC Evening News, you had no idea what was going on. I am just glad Twitter wasn't around back then. But it was news cameras that captured a lot of the most famous scenes in the siege. It wasn't only the news that was covering it. During the siege, Christian radio networks were routinely playing sermons from Koresh.
My name is Dave Koresh. I'm speaking to you from Mount Carmel Center. The first thing that I would like to introduce in our subject is the reasons for the revelation of Jesus Christ.
In fact, Koresh spoke a lot, and he loved to hear himself talk. Not just to the negotiators as well. Koresh, during the firefight on the first day, was shot twice and spent the entire siege talking to negotiators. At one point, the FBI negotiators suggested that home videos of all those in the compound be made and then given to the FBI so that they knew what the mood was in the compound, which Koresh took advantage of to use as a platform to proselytize and get his followers to demand to be left alone.
We have no one telling the world our side, watching the lies that the federal agents have told. It's down.
I'd like to share with you some of my family, and we just thought we'd kind of break the ice and allow people to see just exactly, what kind of people we have here. I'd like to start off first of all with my oldest son. His name is Cyrus. Come sit over here, son. How old are you? 7.
And he showed off his children. As the siege continued, it became clear that Koresh wasn't interested in negotiating. What he wanted mattered more than the safety of those inside and outside the compound. When tanks rolled in on March 2nd, he got pissed off. When the power was cut and the phone lines directed solely to the FBI, he was livid. Koresh also would promise to end the standoff after Passover, but he didn't. By the beginning of April, negotiators had no idea when the standoff would end. Hope came when Koresh suggested he be allowed to send a message to the media, and if he did that, then he would peacefully end the standoff. The FBI negotiators allowed this.
I don't care who they are. Nobody comes to my home with my babies around and shaking guns around without a gun back in their face. That's just the American way.
The FBI isn't commenting on the phone conversation, but DeGuerin says the truth will come out eventually.
Koresh's message was broadcast to the local news, but Koresh again changed his mind. He told the FBI that God had told him to stay put. He was a man who had the power over a good number of people. He knew if he left that compound, that power was gone. He would have done anything to keep that power, even if it meant that he was going to end up dead because of it. The plan for the siege had been in the works since the beginning of April. Janet Reno, the Attorney General, wanted to wait to see if there was hope. She was hoping for a peaceful resolution. But as the days ticked on, it became more and more clear that it wasn't going to happen that way. Reno had to sway Clinton to go ahead with the plan to shoot tear gas into the compound, which he fully agreed to, and on April 19, 1993, the plan was enacted. What the world saw was vehicles pulling up to the compound and smashing into it. The smoke from the tear gas came from the compound, but then the smoke became black, and the compound erupted into flames. Inside, very few people attempted to leave. Most stayed inside. 76 people would lose their lives this day. Koresh, all his children, and other Branch Davidians chose death over the alternative. Koresh refused to let his own children leave, feeling that they were his children and his alone. Koresh himself was killed with a single gunshot wound to his head. Whether he shot himself or had one of his followers do it is unknown. Janet Reno took a lot of blame for this, along with the FBI and the ATF, and for good reason. At first, all three claimed to not use a type of tear gas that explodes, but then a shell casing of one ended up being found, and they had to admit to it, meaning that they shot something into the building that could have set it on fire. Major blunder and stupid, yes. But it wouldn't come out until later that not only did the Branch Davidians set fire to the building, they did so on the orders of Koresh. There is a recording I couldn't find where members are having a conversation within the compound. They specifically state that Koresh ordered the gas to be poured. This also lines up with testimony to those who escaped the burning building. So who is to blame for this? Everyone. Koresh for not willing to negotiate, leading it to a 50-day standoff, then setting fire to his own compound. The FBI for not handling negotiations well. The ATF for shoddy warrants. Janet Reno and Bill Clinton for the end of the siege. No one came out of this a hero. People died, and it made one person really pissed. Timothy McVeigh had watched what was unfolding in Waco religiously, not because he cared much about religious beliefs of the cult, but because the ATF involvement. McVeigh cared more about guns and the Second Amendment rights, and what he saw wasn't a standoff standoff between a doomsday cult and the federal government. He saw a standoff between those who have guns and those who want to take guns away. He went to Waco handing out pamphlets on Second Amendment rights. He used Waco as an example of the injustice he thought he saw, and when the compound was burning, he lost it. Ruby Ridge was bad, Waco was the final straw. When the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah building happened on April 19, 1995, FBI agents had a theory it was retaliation for Waco. They were not wrong. The siege at Waco was made into a series on the Paramount Network called Waco. I haven't seen it. Normally I don't watch things ahead of what I'm researching as to not muddle facts with fiction. It is on Amazon Prime, and I did hear it was on Netflix for a while if you want to check it out. But with that, the month of talking about the Oklahoma City bombing and things linked to it has come to an end. Next month, back to murder and other crimes. Till then,